The trapdoor trembled beneath her boots. The rope bit into her neck before it was even set. The town waited, faces rigid, eyes dry and hard. No wind moved. No prayers drifted. Only breath held tight, uneven, like the hum of some unseen engine. The sheriff's hand hovered over the lever. The governor's men behind him didn't flinch. Everyone expected a show. Everyone wanted it. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She only watched the faces that had once greeted her at church, at the market, at the edge of the town square, and now stared like vultures. "Say your last words," the sheriff said, voice low, deliberate, almost bored. "You already buried them," she said, sharp, spitting the words like stones. The rope didn't shake. The crowd murmured, low and uneasy. Some tried to cough to cover the tremor in their own voices. "Pull it," called an old rancher, his hand raised from the crowd, shaking like the leaves in a storm that didn't exist. "You burned the Caldwell barn," the sheriff said, eyes darting briefly to the governor's men. "Your barn." "My husband died inside," she said, voice cracking but sharp. "He trespassed," said a deputy, stepping forward. He was younger than the sheriff, lean, hands twitching like he wanted to touch fire. "He was born there," she shot back. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that presses into your chest and refuses to leave. No one moved. No one spoke. The rope creaked slightly, swinging with the subtle rhythm of a heartbeat. "You all watched him burn," she whispered, eyes scanning the town. Faces pale and tight. She remembered his screams, remembered the walls buckling and smoke curling in unnatural shapes. Every night since, she had felt the echo in her bones. The sheriff's hand moved. The lever shifted. She felt the rope tighten, a whisper against her throat, a promise of ending. A voice cut through the tension. "Stop." The town turned. Dust rose faintly from the boots of the man who had spoken. His hat was low over his eyes. Boots scuffed in the dirt. The cowboy didn't flinch. Didn't hesitate. Just stood, calm, and said it again, "I'll take her place." The sheriff froze. "You drunk?" he said, narrowing his eyes. "No," the cowboy said. His voice was flat. Steady. Unshakable. "Do you even know her?" the deputy said, disbelief thick in his tone. "Don't need to," the cowboy replied. She blinked. Her chest heaved. She could barely hear the town over the sudden hush. "Why?" she whispered, almost to herself. "Because someone should," he said, voice carrying across the square. The deputy scoffed, stepping forward. "You volunteering for death?" "You said justice must be seen," he said, calmly, almost like reading from a page. The town shifted, uncertain, leaning into the tension. She looked at him. "They'll kill you," she said. "They already did," he said. That line landed like a hammer. "Arson," the deputy spat, trying to provoke, trying to push him back. "I confess to watching," the cowboy said. "Watching what?" "That barn burn," he said, voice quiet but clear. Gasps rippled across the crowd. The sheriff's jaw clenched. "Careful," he muttered, half to himself, half to the man who now bore the rope she had feared. "I was there that night," the cowboy said. She froze. Her stomach dropped. "You were?" He nodded once. "I heard him scream." The sheriff's eyes flicked to the deputy, warning and uncertain. The crowd leaned closer, drawn to the crackling tension, like moths to a candle that might scorch them. "You knew," she whispered. "I was scared," he said. Her lips parted, and for a heartbeat, she saw the young man who had stood by silently, too afraid to act, eyes wide as the flames swallowed everything. "They said it was a lesson," he added, voice low, almost to himself. "A lesson for anyone who wouldn't sell." The sheriff's badge glinted in the sunlight, a symbol suddenly heavy with corruption. He looked at the rope. At the lever. At the man who had stepped forward to take a death meant for her. "Switch them," the sheriff muttered finally. The rope lifted from her neck, brushing her hair. She inhaled, dizzy with relief, trembling but alive. And just like that, it slid across to the cowboy's shoulders. The air shifted. The square seemed to hold its breath again. Dust swirled at his boots. Silence stretched, thick and heavy, and then, the crowd realized the world had changed, even before the first word was spoken. The trapdoor waited beneath his feet. The rope tightened ever so slightly, a whisper. And everything hung in that moment: time, fear, truth, and a reckoning that would not stop with this single breath. The rope rested heavy on his shoulders, biting into the leather of his coat. The town held its breath. The widow stepped back, eyes wide and unblinking, as if trying to measure the weight of what had just happened. The sheriff's hand lingered near the lever, unsure, his fingers twitching. He had never faced a moment like this. The deputy shook, jaw tight, trying to find words that would restore control, but none came. The crowd stirred quietly, unease rippling like small waves across a still pond. No one wanted to act, and yet everyone waited for the act to happen. "You drunk?" the sheriff repeated, louder this time. "No," the cowboy said. Calm, deliberate. Steady. "You don't even know her," the deputy said, his voice sharp, incredulous, a spit of panic hiding behind the words. "Don't need to," the cowboy said. The widow stepped forward, voice trembling. "Why?" "Because someone should," he said. "Someone," the deputy scoffed, stepping closer, voice rising. "You volunteering for death, that's what you are." "Justice must be seen," the cowboy replied. Flat. Final. The town shifted, uncertain, looking between the rope, the man, the widow, and the sheriff. Dust rose from the street as feet shuffled quietly, hesitant, as if touching the dirt might break the spell. She looked at him, eyes wide, voice low. "They'll kill you." "They already did," he said. His voice trembled ever so slightly, a ghost of memory buried beneath calm. "You confessed to arson?" the deputy pressed, trying to force an edge, trying to trap him in words. "I confess to watching," the cowboy said, quiet but unshakable. "Watching what?" "That barn burn," he said. The widow stiffened. Her throat went dry. The sheriff's jaw clenched. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. The young man at the edge of the square whispered something to an old rancher. "Careful," the sheriff muttered. His eyes never left the cowboy. "Careful with your tongue." "I was there that night," the cowboy said, and the words fell like stones. She froze. "You were?" He nodded once. "I heard him scream." Her chest tightened, and a memory rushed up, the smoke, the flames, the pounding on the door, the heat curling her hair. Her husband's screams had never left her. They hadn't left him either. The deputy's hand twitched toward the rope. "You knew?" "I was scared," the cowboy said. "They said it was a lesson. A lesson for anyone who wouldn't sell." The sheriff's hand hovered over the lever, trembling slightly. His badge glinted like a warning. Authority seemed to weigh heavier than ever before, but even he sensed it shifting. The rope, the lever, the man, none of it belonged to him now. The widow's voice shook, barely audible. "You knew?" "I stayed silent," the cowboy said. "I watched. I listened. I hoped someone else would act." "Someone else," she repeated. Her voice sharp. "No one came." The old rancher muttered, almost to himself, "They waited for someone to die." "And someone did," the cowboy said quietly. "Someone died before I moved." "Why now?" the widow whispered. "Why take his place?" "Because if not me, then no one," he said. His eyes lifted to meet hers. "If justice is seen, someone has to pay its cost." The sheriff swallowed hard, glancing at the governor's men. Their faces were neutral, unreadable, but the tension stretched between them like wire. "Switch them," the sheriff muttered finally, almost to himself, a command no one expected. The rope was lifted from her neck. It brushed her hair, soft and cruel. Relief hit her like a wave she had feared she'd never feel again. The rope slid across to the cowboy's shoulders. His body was steady. His eyes calm, but a flicker of memory passed behind them, flames licking at wood, smoke curling, screams swallowed by heat. He carried it like a scar, quiet, unshakable. The town moved around them like a tide. People leaned forward, whispered, pointed, but no one dared speak too loudly. The widow watched him. Her hands trembled, heart tight. He had taken a death meant for her, and somehow, it felt like a debt she couldn't repay. "Why would you do it?" she said again, voice barely audible. "I'm already dead," he said. "Inside. I was the first to lose everything." The sheriff's fingers hovered over the lever. He had power, but he had no control. He looked at the crowd. They shifted uneasily, caught in a tension that might snap. The deputy tried again, voice sharp, forceful, but hollow. "This is madness. Pull him down. End this farce." "No," the widow whispered. "Let him do it. Let him stand." The rope swung slightly in the windless square. Shadows stretched long across the dusty street. Every eye was on him, but he didn't flinch. The cowboy's calm was a mirror to the widow's fear, a quiet promise that someone was willing to bear what she could not. The sheriff's jaw tightened. He looked at the lever. Then at the badge. Then at the man under the rope. For the first time in years, he didn't know what to do. He had expected obedience. He had expected silence. But this? This was something else entirely. The trapdoor waited beneath the cowboy's boots. The air held still, heavy with history, with injustice, with the scent of burned timber and grief that refused to fade. Dust rose slowly from the dirt. Every footstep echoed in the quiet. Every heartbeat throbbed in the square. And then, without ceremony, the world shifted. The rope carried weight. The rope carried memory. The rope carried the first spark of reckoning. The town waited, unsure whether it had begun or whether it would ever end. The rope pressed against his collarbone, a dull, steady weight that burned into his skin. He did not resist. The trapdoor waited beneath his boots, unyielding. The widow stepped back, still trembling, still processing that she had been spared, but even relief came with a sharp edge. She watched him, and in his calm, she saw something she did not want to echo of her own terror, a mirror of the nights she had spent awake, listening to the wind through broken windows, waiting for the echoes of screams that would never leave her. "Last words," the sheriff said, voice low but strained. He looked at her first. "I'm sorry." "For what?" she asked, voice shaking. "For not opening the door," he said, almost whispering, and the words cut sharper than the rope against his neck. The crowd shifted. Some gasped. Some pressed forward slightly, hesitant, as though leaning in could pull the truth closer. "You saw?" she asked. "I stayed outside," he said. "They barred it. Locked it tight." The deputy stepped forward, face pale. "Lies. Don't tell me lies. They locked it." I pounded. Screamed. Tried. His voice trembled, almost imperceptibly. "They said it was law. That it was necessary." "Necessary?" the widow spat. "To watch him burn?" "Yes," he said, voice flat. "To show what happens to those who resist." The sheriff shifted, unease flickering across his face. The badge at his chest felt heavier than it had ever felt. Authority had a weight, and for the first time, it had shifted. The rope, the trapdoor, the man standing beneath it, none of it belonged to him now. "Why did you stay silent?" the widow demanded, her voice shaking but strong. "Why watch?" "Because men disappear," he said quietly. "Because no one believed they could stop it. Because I thought maybe if I stayed alive, I could make it right later." "And later never came," she said, the words bitter. "No," he said. "It never did." The crowd murmured, voices low. The old rancher muttered, he had his chance. The deputy flinched, but no one moved him. "I thought someone else would act," the cowboy said, staring at the dirt. "I hoped someone else would stop it. I was wrong." "You were wrong," she repeated, soft but sharp. Her throat burned. Her hands trembled. "And now we stand here, watching you take what was meant for me." Do you understand what that means? I understand, he said. It means someone is finally paying. And maybe this changes something. The sheriff swallowed hard. He looked at the lever. He looked at the rope. He looked at the cowboy. The weight of history pressed down like stones in a well he could not climb out of. The deputy's hand twitched toward the rope. Enough. End this farce. He's not the one. No, the widow said, cutting him off. Her voice, though trembling, held power now. Let him do it. Let him stand. Let him carry what I've carried for years. The rope shifted slightly as the sheriff's fingers loosened, uncertainty bleeding through his stance. The cowboy's body was steady, yet beneath the calm was something the crowd couldn't see, a tight coil of memory, the smoke, the fire, the screams, the doors slammed shut, the pounding, the ash, the heat. You think standing there makes it right, the deputy hissed. I'm already dead, he said, voice low. Inside. I've carried it for years. The sheriff's jaw tightened. He had power. He had the law. He had a lever. But he had no control. Not anymore. He glanced at the governor's men, their faces blank, unreadable, but the tension was theirs too. The square was still. Dust hung in the air, rising from quiet feet, trembling hands, breaths held too long. The widow's eyes never left him. She took a step closer. Then why do it? Why offer yourself? Because if not me, he said, voice steady now, then no one. If justice is seen, someone has to pay its cost. Someone has to bear it, even if it is only me. The sheriff's fingers twitched again. His thumb hovered near the lever. He looked at the crowd. Their faces were pale, anxious, and silent. None moved to help. None dared. You could have run, she whispered, almost to herself, as if testing the words in the wind. I could have, he said. But someone had to stay. And I'm the one left. The rope swayed slightly. Sunlight caught the dust, glinting in the air. Every heartbeat echoed in the square. Every eye was fixed. The air thickened with the smell of sweat, dust, and fear. The trapdoor beneath his boots waited, merciless. Every second stretched. Every shadow pressed closer. Every memory, every scream, every fire, every locked door weighed on him and her in the town, and still no one moved. Finally, the sheriff spoke, his voice low, uncertain. Switch them. The rope lifted from her neck. It brushed her hair. Relief came like a wave, but it burned too, sharp and jagged. The rope slid across to the cowboy's shoulders. His eyes were calm, but behind them flickered the memory of the fire, the screams, the doors, and the silence that had followed. The crowd exhaled as one. Some whispered. Some gasped. Some stepped closer, drawn to the tension, as if proximity could offer truth. The widow's chest heaved. He had taken a death meant for her. And somehow, the debt felt heavier than the rope itself. The trapdoor waited. The rope weighed memory and fear and justice. And everything in the square held its breath, knowing that nothing would ever be the same. The town moved slowly toward the burned barn. Smoke curled faintly from the charred beams. Ash clung to boots and skirts. The rope still hung from the gallows behind them, swinging lightly, a silent witness to the choice that had shifted everything. The sheriff walked beside the widow, jaw tight, eyes flicking to the cowboy under the rope. The deputy limped along behind, pale, hand brushing at a scrape on his arm. The old rancher muttered under his breath, cursing and praying in the same breath. No one spoke more than necessary. The town felt suspended between past and present, fear and reckoning, truth and what they had been told. They said it was fire, the cowboy said quietly, scanning the blackened beams. They said it was a warning. Warning, the widow said, voice low, sharp. Warning for who? Him? You? Me? The deputy stepped forward, face tight. This is madness. Stop digging into things that are already buried. Buried, the widow shot back. Bones aren't buried. Lies aren't buried. Ash doesn't lie. The sheriff grunted. Bring the hinges. Bring the hinges, she repeated, frowning. The door, he said. The barn door. Check it. See if the story matches. A blacksmith stepped forward, hands rough, gloves dusty. He produced 2 warped hinges. Bent inward, blackened by fire, warped almost to uselessness. He held them up like evidence, and the town leaned closer. Murmurs ran through the crowd. They sealed it from the outside, he said. The widow's eyes went wide. She pressed forward, voice trembling, sharp. Say it. Say it's not just fire. Say it. The deputy took a step back, white-knuckled. Coincidence. Then why were you there? The cowboy demanded. His voice was low, controlled, sharp as a knife. I patrol, the deputy said, voice faltering. You watched, the cowboy said, and the words landed in the quiet like stones. The sheriff's hand twitched. Badge gleamed. Authority pressed down, heavy, corrupted, powerless all at once. He shook his head. Why didn't you speak before? Because men disappear, the cowboy said, voice soft, haunted. Because they took him. Because they made sure no one else would know. The widow swallowed. Her throat dry. Who? Who disappeared? The deputy swallowed, face pale. We don't. Farmer Thomas, said the old rancher, voice low, opposed the land sale last year. They threw him in the river. Nobody found him. Nobody said a word. The widow's chest tightened. The memory of her husband's screams rose like smoke in her mind. She pressed her hands to her stomach. You burned him alive, she whispered. Careful, the deputy said, stepping forward, voice urgent. No, she snapped. No more careful. No more silence. She pressed closer to the ashes, scanning the remnants of burnt wood. Every charred beam, every curled shard, every blackened nail spoke to her, whispered the story the town refused to tell. The cowboy's voice was soft beside her. So do I. I heard him. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. The badge felt heavy. The rope behind them swayed lightly in the windless square. Every shadow seemed to stretch, leaning toward them, pulling at memory, pulling at fear, pulling at the unspoken horrors of a town that had chosen obedience over justice for too long. Who ordered it? The sheriff asked finally, voice low, almost to himself. All eyes flicked upward. A faint glimmer of authority waited beyond the square. Symbolic, threatening, silent. The governor, though absent, had been here in every act. His will had burned through the town like the fire in the barn. Watch yourselves, the deputy muttered, voice low. The widow's hand shook slightly as she brushed ash from her skirt. Every night I hear him, she said, voice trembling, haunted. And I hear him too, the cowboy said, soft, almost apologetic. The town shifted. Uneasy. Footsteps hesitant. Whispers rising. The sheriff's jaw tightened. His badge seemed heavier than ever. Power had been questioned. Authority had faltered. And the rope still swung, a ghost of the choice that had just been made, a reminder of the debt carried forward. We dig, the sheriff finally said, voice low, reluctant. Tonight. Tonight, the widow repeated, eyes wide, sharp. Her hands clenched at her sides. She could feel the fire of the past still smoldering beneath the soil, beneath the ash, beneath the town itself. She knew what waited below, knew what had been hidden. They approached the well near the barn, old and silent, untouched since the day the barn burned. Dust and ash clung to their boots. The widow's eyes flicked to the rope. The rope was a witness, a marker, a memory. It swung faintly as if alive. The blackened beams of the barn framed the sky above them. Shadows leaned like watchers. The air was heavy. Every footstep carried the weight of the past. Every whisper carried warning. Every breath carried the smell of smoke, ash, and something older, something that had been buried too long. The cowboy stepped forward, eyes fixed on the well. He lowered his hand, brushing dust from the edge. "We see it all now," he said quietly. "Ashes don't lie. They don't hide truth." The widow's voice was low, urgent. "Then we face it. All of it." The sheriff stepped beside them, uncertain. Badge gone from chest. Authority replaced by fear, by conscience, by the silent acknowledgement that the town had waited too long. The deputy paled, shifting his weight. "We can't." "No more hiding," the widow said. "No more lies. No more silence. We face it. Right here. Right now." The town leaned in closer. Dust rose. Ash stirred. Shadows stretched. The rope swung. Silence pressed down, heavy, unyielding, haunted. The first shovelful of dirt struck stone at the well's edge. The sound echoed. The crowd tensed. The past was rising. The secrets were moving. The memory of fire, smoke, screams, and betrayal had returned. And in the quiet, the rope behind them whispered in the windless square, a reminder of the debt yet unpaid, a warning that justice had only begun. The deputy lay sprawled in the dirt, one hand pressed against his chest, eyes wide and blinking in disbelief. Dust and ash rose around him, catching the pale light of late afternoon, swirling like smoke from the burned barn. No one moved at first. The town froze, a moment stretched too long, like a wound held open. The rope behind the cowboy swung faintly in the still air, a silent observer, a weight that no one dared touch. The sheriff's hand hovered near the lever. His fingers twitched as if it might snap him out of the paralysis, but the world around him had shifted irreversibly. "You shot him," the sheriff finally barked, voice sharp, trembling. His eyes searched for the culprit, for someone to blame, for a reason to restore order. He reached," the widow said, voice trembling but forceful. Her hands shook, dust clinging to the palms, but she held her gaze steady on the deputy. "Doesn't matter," the sheriff snapped. "The law. The town." "Not anymore," the cowboy said, voice low, steady, almost detached. He stood beneath the rope, shoulders squared, eyes scanning the crowd. His calm was a wall no one could breach. "Not today." The town shifted. Uneasy. Footsteps shuffled. Whispers rose. People glanced at one another, unsure whether to step forward or flee. "Let her finish it," muttered the old rancher, leaning on his cane, eyes sharp under the brim of his hat. "No more killing," said a young mother, stepping to the edge of the crowd, hands clenched. Her voice was firm, trembling, but deliberate. "No more." The deputy groaned, mouth opening and closing, face pale. He tried to rise, but the wound was deep, and the weight of his authority seemed to vanish along with the blood pooling around him. "He owns your fear," the cowboy said quietly to the widow, voice low. "He owns the wells. Your cattle. Your graves. Everything he touches, he bends to his will." "You already fight him every day," the widow whispered back. The words trembled on her lips, sharp with the memory of smoke, heat, and screams. "You don't even know it, but you do." The sheriff swallowed hard. He looked at the body in the dirt, then at the rope swaying behind the cowboy, then at the widow. He felt the weight of years pressing down, pressing harder than the badge he wore. "We can't fight him," he muttered. "You can," she said, voice tight. "You already do." The cowboy glanced at the deputy, still gasping weakly, eyes wide and panicked. "He took everything he could from us," the cowboy said softly. "But he can't take us. Not all of us." A hush fell over the square. The wind stirred ash and dust around their boots. Every shadow seemed to lean closer, watching, waiting. The past pressed on them: fire, smoke, screams, vanished bodies, burned barns, broken laws, and whispered threats. The town held its breath. The deputy whispered, weak and defiant, "The governor will raise this place." "You think it ends here?" The sheriff's jaw clenched. He looked at the rope, at the cowboy, at the widow. His badge weighed like stone in his pocket. "We don't need him to raise it." "Fear does the same job," he said, voice low, almost to himself. The widow crouched slightly, hands brushing the dirt near the deputy. Her eyes flicked to his pale face. "Who gave the order?" she asked. Her voice was tight with rage, sharp, trembling. The deputy's lips parted. He started to speak, but the world refused to pause. A cough from the old rancher. A whisper from the mother. Dust swirled. Sunlight glinted off the rope. Every heartbeat stretched too long. Before he could answer, the light in his eyes dimmed. His last words were swallowed by the dust. The town realized, almost collectively, that the debt had passed from one pair of shoulders to another. The weight of past horrors would not rest quietly anymore. The sheriff's hand dropped to his side. He looked at the rope swinging behind the cowboy. "This was meant to end today," he muttered. The cowboy's voice was quiet, steady. "It just started." The widow straightened. Her eyes, dark and haunted, scanned the town. Faces pressed together, worried, fearful, guilty. Some looked away, some stepped closer, as if proximity could shield them from the truth. "Who listens to the wind in the burned barns?" she whispered. "Who remembers the smoke that swallowed them? The screams? The doors locked from the outside?" The sheriff shook his head. Badge felt heavier than ever. He looked at the dust, the rope, the crowd, the widow, the cowboy. Power had shifted. Fear had fractured. Justice was no longer a distant word. The cowboy turned to her, voice soft, almost apologetic. "You don't have to do this alone." "I already have," she said. "Every night, every memory, every scream. I carried it all. Someone had to see it through. Someone has to end it." The old rancher stepped closer. "Then face it," he said. His voice was low, gravelly, firm. "Face what they did. Face it together." The town moved. Footsteps shuffled. Hands clutched one another. Eyes met in quiet solidarity. The rope swayed faintly, but it no longer hung only over the cowboy. It hung over the memory of all of them, over the shame, the fear, the betrayal, and the silent debts of the past. The widow bent down, brushing dust from the deputy's shoulder. The body was still, pale, final. "Say it," she whispered. "Say the truth, even if you're gone." No answer came. Only the wind stirred the ash. Only the rope swung. Only the past waited to be unearthed. The sheriff stepped forward, voice low, almost a surrender. "No one hangs today," he said, finally, firmly. The crowd shifted. Murmurs rippled, then quieted. Relief mixed with fear. Anger mingled with hope. The rope swayed gently in the sunlight, a silent witness, a reminder of choices made and debts carried forward. The sound of horse hooves echoed faintly from the ridge beyond the square. Dust rose in a slow swirl, hinting at the return of authority that had not yet left them, at the distant governor's riders, at the power that would try to reclaim control. But for now, the town stood still. The widow's gaze lifted, strong now, unflinching. "We decide now," she said. "We carry it. We face it. Together." The cowboy nodded beside her. The sheriff's hand stayed lowered. The rope swayed lightly in the windless square, a reminder of what had been, and what was still to come. The town exhaled slowly. The past had arrived. The reckoning had begun. The shot had split the town, but the echo would carry far beyond the square. Dust rose on the horizon, a faint shimmer that twisted with the sun. Hooves struck the dry earth in steady rhythm. The riders appeared on the ridge, distant shapes growing larger with every heartbeat. The widow's eyes narrowed. The cowboy stepped beside her, rope swaying behind him, shadow stretching long across the square. The sheriff took a step forward, jaw tight, as authority arrived in the form of men on horseback, their silhouettes sharp and silent against the fading light. "They're here," the cowboy said, voice low. "Too many," the sheriff muttered. He glanced at the crowd. Faces pale, anxious, uncertain. The weight of years pressed down on him heavier than the badge that had once defined his power. "Lawful," the deputy hissed weakly from the dirt, one hand pressed to his chest. "They'll make it lawful. They'll hang you both." "Lawful to who?" the widow spat back. Her voice trembled, but it carried fear and anger mixed in every syllable. The riders slowed, spreading out as they neared the town square. No one dismounted yet. They surveyed silently, eyes scanning, calculating. "Lead rider," the sheriff said under his breath, "the one who speaks last." The widow pressed closer to the cowboy. "This is where you leave," she said. Her voice was firm. Her eyes dark, haunted, determined. "I stayed once," he said quietly. "Not leaving again." The riders reached the edge of the square. Dust swirled around their boots. The lead rider dismounted, tall, broad-shouldered, eyes sharp, hand brushing the reins. He didn't speak at first. Only scanned the crowd. "We heard a shot," he said finally, voice low but cutting. "We came as fast as we could." "Deputy acted rash," the sheriff said, voice trembling, trying to balance authority with the impossibility of control. The lead rider's eyes narrowed. "Where's the prisoner?" The widow stepped forward. "Here," she said. Her voice strong, unwavering. The crowd stirred. Some leaned forward. Some shifted uneasily. "You were sentenced," the lead rider said, eyes flicking between her and the cowboy beneath the rope. "Sentence delayed," the sheriff said, almost to himself. He glanced at the rope swaying behind the cowboy, a silent reminder of the choices already made. "By whose authority?" the lead rider asked, voice sharp now. The sheriff looked down at the badge he held in his hand. It seemed heavy, meaningless, corrupted. He let it drop into the dirt. "Mine," he said. Gasps ran through the crowd. Dust rose from the street as whispers rippled through the town square. The widow's chest heaved. She pressed her hands together, eyes fixed on the lead rider. "This is where it ends," she said. "For us. For the town. For what was lost." The lead rider's hand brushed his belt, fingers resting lightly on the gun. "Last chance," he said. "You think this changes power?" she asked, voice steady, defiant. "It changes us." A silence fell. The town held its breath. Shadows stretched long across the dusty square. The rope swung faintly in the windless air, a ghost of choice and consequence. One by one, the townspeople stepped forward. "Old rancher, cane in hand, so do I." "Young mother, fists clenched, so do I." Faces that had once bowed to fear now rose with quiet defiance. The air vibrated with a shift no authority could erase. The lead rider's jaw tightened. He looked at the cowboy under the rope. He looked at the widow. He looked at the townspeople who had chosen to stand. His silence weighed heavy. "We're outnumbered," he whispered to one of his men. The widow's eyes flicked to the ridge beyond, scanning for more signs of control. None came. The air felt suspended. Tension hung thick, unbroken, alive. "This isn't over," the lead rider said finally, voice low. He swung back onto his horse. Dust rose again with the rhythm of hooves. The remaining riders followed, slow, deliberate. Authority retreated, but it had not abandoned the town entirely. The widow's chest heaved. Relief came slowly, but she did not move from her stance. She glanced at the cowboy. "We survived," she said, voice soft, almost whispering. "For now," he replied. His eyes scanned the ridge, calculating. He brushed a hand across the rope. "But survival isn't enough." "Not yet." The sheriff stepped beside her. Hands trembled. Eyes dark. "You want someone to hang?" "Hang me first," he said, voice low, almost a surrender. "No," the widow said sharply. "No more sacrifices. Not today. Not ever again." The rope swayed lightly, catching sunlight, dust curling faintly around it. It had once carried death. Now it carried memory, witness, warning. It reminded them all of what had been taken, what had been survived, and what could not be ignored. The town exhaled slowly. Footsteps shifted, hands unclenched, whispers rose then faded. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching longer, painting the square in gold and gray. The widow's gaze lifted. She pressed her hands together. "We build new," she said, voice carrying across the square. The cowboy nodded beside her. "Together," he said. The sheriff lowered his head, silent. His eyes flicked to the rope, to the shadows, to the people who had chosen defiance. He swallowed, uncertain, weight pressing down, memory pressing harder. Authority had arrived. Authority had left. But the past, the debt, the grief, the fire, the ash still waited. The rope swung gently in the still air. Dust settled. The town remained quiet but alive. Change had arrived. Fear had fractured. Silence had shifted. The widow's eyes scanned the ridge one last time. Horse hooves faded. Dust settled into the cracks of the square. Shadows stretched across the dirt, long, heavy, unyielding. "We decide now," she said quietly, softly, but firm. "We carry it. We face it. Together." The cowboy's hand brushed hers. They stood side by side. Rope swinging behind them, rope swinging like memory. Dust settling around boots. Ash clinging to skirts. Smoke gone, but fire still burned in their minds. The town exhaled as one. The past had arrived. Reckoning had begun. Authority had tested them. And for now, they had passed. The rope hung silent in the gallows, swaying faintly in the windless afternoon. Dust clung to its fibers, old and new, memory and consequence tangled together. The widow and the cowboy stood beneath it, side by side, faces tight with exhaustion, grief, and something sharper, resolve. The sheriff lingered nearby, hands clenching and unclenching. The town gathered slowly, hesitant, watching, waiting. The air was thick with ash, sweat, and silence, the kind that presses deep into your chest and refuses to leave. "What does it mean?" she whispered, voice low, almost to herself, eyes tracing the rope as if it might answer. "It means someone had to see it," the cowboy said. His voice quiet, firm. "Someone had to carry the memory." "Carry it," she said, voice trembling. "Why him? Why now?" "Because it was time," he said. He glanced at the sheriff, then the square. "Because silence has weight. And someone had to lift it, even if it cut them in half." The sheriff's jaw tightened. "And the law?" he asked, voice flat, hollow. "What about the law?" "Law," the widow said sharply. Her hands clenched at her sides. "Law didn't stop it. Law didn't speak. Law waited while men burned alive." The deputy lay in the dirt, still weak, pale, muttering. His eyes flicked toward the rope, then away. "Authority," he whispered, voice strained, trembling. "The Governor Hill." "Authority didn't save anyone," the cowboy interrupted. His voice cut sharp as steel. "It just gave permission to watch. The rope is a witness, not a tool. It tells the truth we all avoided." The crowd shifted. Murmurs ran through them, low, hesitant. Faces that had once looked away now leaned in. Dust rose from boots. Some hands trembled. Some clutched one another. Shadows stretched across the square, long and heavy. The widow stepped closer, voice steadying. "So it's not about hanging anymore?" "No," the cowboy said. "It's about seeing. It's about remembering. The rope doesn't punish. It marks the moment when fear ended and choice began." The sheriff shook his head. Badge heavy in his pocket, useless in his grip. "Choice, responsibility, it's bigger than one man," he said. "Yes," the widow said, voice tight. "It is. And we carry it together." A breeze stirred, lifting dust from the square. Ash from the barn drifted faintly through the air, black curls against the fading sun. The rope swayed again, subtle, gentle, like a heartbeat stretched across memory. The cowboy touched the rope lightly, fingers brushing fibers. Every knot, he said quietly, every fray, every fiber, it tells who stood, who stayed silent, who acted. It's heavier than death. It's heavier than fear. But it carries truth. Truth, the sheriff asked, voice barely above a whisper. Truth, the widow said firmly. Every lie we've told ourselves, every secret we've buried, every scream we've ignored, it's all there. Hanging in the air, in the rope, in the ash, in the square. The old rancher stepped forward, leaning heavily on his cane. We waited too long, he muttered, voice gravelly, low. But maybe we finally see it. Maybe we finally understand what it means. And if we forget, the deputy muttered, voice weak. You won't, the cowboy said. Not now. Not ever. The rope won't let you. We won't let it. The widow pressed her hands together. It means we can't pretend anymore. It means we face it. Every burned barn, every lost life, every locked door. We remember. We act. The sheriff's eyes flicked to the rope again. He exhaled slowly. It's just rope, he muttered. But even he didn't sound convinced. It's more than that, the cowboy said softly. It's every choice we didn't make. Every scream we ignored. Every life that disappeared. The widow's gaze lifted. It means we carry it forward. Not with fear. Not with silence. With action. With courage. With the knowledge that someone has to stand. The town leaned closer, faces pale, eyes wide. Some whispered. Some nodded. Dust settled around boots. Shadows pressed longer, stretching toward the gallows. The rope swayed faintly, catching the sunlight. The sheriff finally spoke, voice low, quiet, almost in surrender. And if it asks for more? Then we give it, the cowboy said. Because it's never just about one life. It's about every life that came before. Every life that follows. That's what it means. The widow's chest heaved. She stepped forward, brushing ash from her skirt. It means we survive. And we remember. And we never let it happen again. The rope swayed one last time in the sunlight. Dust stirred in gentle spirals around their boots. Every heartbeat echoed in the square. Every shadow stretched. Every pair of eyes held the weight of truth. Then let it stay, the widow said finally. Let it watch. Let it mark the moment we decided we would no longer be silent. The cowboy nodded beside her, fingers brushing lightly against the rope. It's done, he said. For now. But it waits. And that's enough. The sheriff lowered his head. Badge heavy, useless, symbolic. Authority had arrived. Authority had faltered. And the rope, quiet, swaying, witnessed everything. The town exhaled slowly. Footsteps shifted. Hands unclenched. Whispers rose and faded. Ash settled into the cracks of the square. Shadows stretched long, heavy, unyielding. The widow's gaze lifted one last time. It means, she said, voice soft, quiet, firm, we carry the truth. And we act on it. Always. The cowboy's hand brushed hers. They stood together. The rope swayed gently behind them, a reminder of choices, of courage, of memory. Dust settled on skirts, boots, hands. Ash clung faintly to clothes. Smoke was gone, but fire lingered in their minds, quiet, constant, impossible to ignore. The town remained, silent, alive, changed. The rope waited, watching, marking the moment when fear fractured, when silence ended, and when the people began to understand what it truly meant to bear witness. The widow stood alone at the edge of the burned barn, dust settling in quiet spirals around her boots. The rope swayed faintly behind her, a silent witness to everything she had endured and everything she had survived. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes were sharp, fixed on the horizon where the ridge met sky. The town waited, uncertain, silent, watching her make the choice that would mark the rest of their lives. I can't keep doing this, the sheriff muttered from the square, voice low, almost breaking. I can't. I can't decide for everyone anymore. You don't have to, she said sharply, voice carrying. No one does. That's what I'm learning. You follow me, or you step aside. The cowboy stepped closer, rope swaying behind him. You've carried it all these years, he said quietly. Every memory, every scream, every shadow in your house at night. You've survived fires, threats, the silence of this town. And now, she asked, voice trembling but strong. Now what am I? Now, he said, you decide. And you decide for all of us. A gust of wind stirred dust from the charred beams. Ash floated like tiny ghosts around their boots. The sheriff's hands were empty, trembling. The deputy remained on the ground, pale, still muttering, half alive, half afraid to speak. The old rancher leaned heavily on his cane, eyes dark beneath the brim of his hat. The mother at the edge of the square shifted closer, fists clenched, silent support radiating in the tense air. The widow's gaze shifted to the rope. It had carried fear, had carried memory, had carried the weight of lives lost and choices avoided. She stepped forward and brushed her fingers along the fibers. The rope swung lightly, dust curling in gentle spirals. What does it want from me? She whispered, voice low, almost to herself. It wants acknowledgement, the cowboy said softly. It wants recognition. It wants someone to see what we've all ignored. She exhaled slowly, pressing her hands together. I see it, she said. I see everything. Every scream. Every fire. Every locked door. Every life they took. Every lie we told ourselves to keep quiet. The sheriff's jaw clenched. You can't do it alone, he said, voice low, almost pleading. I won't, she said firmly. But I have to lead. Someone has to carry it forward. The crowd shifted. Murmurs ran through them, low, hesitant. Some leaned forward. Some glanced down at the dirt. Every face reflected the weight of memory and fear, the burden of past choices, and the first spark of courage. The deputy muttered again, voice weak, trembling, the governor, he'll come back, he'll make it lawful. You're weak, the widow said, voice sharp. You've never understood what it's like to survive fire, to hear screams in your sleep, to carry memory that burns hotter than the sun. The law won't save you. You'll die buried under your own fear. The old rancher muttered under his breath, cane tapping the dirt. She speaks truth. The widow's eyes swept the town. We've waited too long for justice to come from anyone else. We've waited for men to decide, for authority to act, for silence to end. It hasn't. And it won't. Not unless we do it ourselves. The cowboy stepped closer. And we will. Together. A hush fell. Dust settled. Shadows stretched across the square, long and heavy. Every heartbeat seemed amplified. The rope swayed faintly behind them, a ghost of the past, a symbol of endurance, a reminder of all that had been lost and survived. I'm ready, she said finally, voice low but unwavering. I'm ready to see it through. All of it. The sheriff's hands twitched, fingers brushing the badge at his pocket. Authority had arrived, faltered, and now waited silently. You're sure? He asked. Yes, she said. I'm sure. No more waiting. No more silence. We face it. Every fire, every scream, every death. And we decide what comes next. The crowd leaned closer. Murmurs rose and fell like wind through the charred beams. Every face reflected memory, fear, grief, and the first stirrings of courage. The old rancher coughed, voice low but firm. Then face it, he said. Face it and survive. The widow nodded. She stepped forward, brushing ash from the charred earth, dust clinging to her skirt. The rope swayed gently behind her, catching the sunlight, fibers glinting faintly. Every knot, every fray, every thread told a story she had lived and remembered. The cowboy's hand brushed hers. We do it together, he said softly. Yes, she said. Her voice carried across the square, firm and resolute. Together. We remember. We act. We survive. And we make sure no one forgets.